my colleague Ari actually kicked off this conference talking about how new tools and techniques are actually going to lead to innovation management 2.0. But I want to talk about a dimension that people are not paying much attention to, right? Business model innovation. And we'll start off by looking at some success stories in innovation itself. And then there's a lot of confusion around what exactly is a business model. So I'll try to quickly put together a framework, which I think many of you might be familiar with, but just to make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to business models itself. And then the question I'm going to try and answer is, why is it going to become important today? Why didn't I talk about this 10 years ago, other than the fact that I was not at Lux then, right? And then finally, what does this all mean for you? And if somebody wants to go away right now, I'm going to give you the key takeaway right now. The key takeaway here was, which was really fascinating, when we talk about innovation, we talk about sexy products like iPhones and Kindles. But guess what? There's a huge, huge unlocked opportunity with your existing products. Maybe not bigger, but equally big, right? By just using business model innovation. But before we jump into the talk, I want to do something that we love. I think everybody in this room is going to love. Surveys, right? The first question, just a show of hands, please. How many of you in this room are trying to innovate new products and services? About 70% of the room. For the remaining folks, the good news is you are at the right conference. We're talking about innovation, and hopefully you can go back home and build your next product, or go to your office tomorrow and build the next product. The bad news is that your boss is not going to approve your expense report this time, right? The second question I have is, how many of you use tools to manage your innovation? The kind of tools we've been talking about. Show of hands, please. About 50% of the room. And this kind of lines up with what my colleagues, Mike Holman and Matt Wagner, they've been doing these studies, talking to a lot of companies, and they found something very, very similar, right? And hopefully, you'll learn more in this conference and figure out how to do this. Finally, my last question is, how many of you think you're better than average when it comes to innovating new products and services? Few people. I think the caffeine hasn't kicked in as yet. Great. So there are many companies, like the people who raised their hands, who are very good at innovating new products. So let's look at some success stories out here, right? I'll start with BASF, the biggest specialty chemical companies in the world, right? And the company plays in many, many markets, right? And one of the markets they play in is agrochemicals, and more specifically, herbicides. Right? Herbicides are a funny product, right? You apply them, and you need rainfall for those herbicides to get activated. And that's kind of a pain point for farmers because they don't know whether it's going to rain or not, right? And so there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of risk around it. And so BASF made the right decision when they said, we are going to innovate a new herbicide in 2001, which would work with only 1/4 inch of rainfall for activation, compared to competitor products, which required at least 1 inch of rainfall. So clearly, a really good innovation targeting a customer pain point. Let's look at another example out here from Pfizer. Again, the biggest pharma company in the world. The company actually played in many, many markets, but one market they didn't play in was diabetes. And if you think about diabetes, it's a painful disease, and the customer experience for diabetics is really not that great, right? You're taking these needles, sticking them into your body every few hours, injecting yourself with insulin. And when Pfizer announced we're going to work with Aventis to basically develop inhalable insulin, it was welcome news, right? All the diabetics loved it. And from the day Pfizer announced this, it was just bonanza time for them. Right? 2006, Aventis got acquired by another company, or I think it merged. But as a part of that, they were able to buy off all those patents that they had jointly worked on that particular product or technology. 2006, again, a fantastic year for them. FDA comes back and says, hey, we love this product. There's some minor caveats here and there, but hey, we love it. The European Regulatory Agency does the same thing. And then eventually, 2006, again, a fantastic year for them. They launched a product, right? Again, great innovation meets a customer need. Final example from Michelin, right, the tire company. And you might think, what's so great about tires? This is one of the most innovative tire companies in the world. This company first introduced radial tires way back in 1940s, right? And in 1990s, they announced we're going to develop the PAC system, which is basically a run-flat tire. And for people who are not familiar, this was a tire that could run for 125 miles at 55 miles per hour, even after you get a flat. Think about it, right? You're driving on the highway, you don't have a cell phone signal, you have a flat tire, it's December, there's an ice storm. What could be better than this, right? Fixes a customer pain point and is also a fantastic innovation. What is common to all these examples? What's common is they had fantastic R&D talent, great R&D labs, and they used the right innovation management tools to manage their innovation process. But there's something else that's common to these companies or to these examples. And as some of you might know about these examples, or some of you saw that teeny-weeny question mark that I buried at the end of my statement in the outline, all these companies failed. BASF, right, brought this product into the marketplace in 2001. 2001 to 2016, 1.5 decades, they saw only a 2 to 3% growth in their product, same as other competitors. Pfizer expected a $2 billion market by 2010. 2007, they actually pulled the plug and write off $3 billion, right? And then think about Michelin, right? CFO comes on stage and says, hey, this is going to be the product in the world. Nobody's going to use any other kinds of tires. And then 2007, he pushes the PR department on stage and tells them to go and tell people, hey, there's no demand for this product, right? What this means is that cutting-edge innovation does not always generate profits. And in fact, studies indicate that out of all the product development products you're developing today in your lab, only 25% of them are going to get to the marketplace. What's worse is that only half of those 25% are going to even generate profits for you. What went wrong here in these examples? And the answer, as you might have guessed from the title of the talk, lies in business models, right? So before we do a postmortem, let's try to understand what exactly is a business model. There's a lot of confusion. When I mention the word business model, my colleagues, clients, they come and say, oh, new revenue streams, new profits. We need to be on the same page. And I know some of you are going to be familiar with what I'm going to talk about, but bear with me for a minute. So when we started digging deeper to clear this confusion, we looked at ideas from thought leaders, right? From Harvard Business School, MIT Sloan down the road, INSEAD. And what we realized is one of the first questions you need to answer to understand what's a business model is really to understand the DNA or the framework on which an organization is built. Very broadly, there are customer needs, right? And then some people, a group of people get together, form an organization, and they say, we want to meet these customer needs. And so they put together this high-level strategy, right? Once they have a strategy in place, this determines what kind of capabilities this organization needs. So for example, R&D capabilities, production capabilities, or if you're a pure consulting firm, like BCG or McKinsey, it's just problem-solving capabilities. That, in turn, determines what kind of resources you need, employees, money, equipment, capital expenses, and so on and so forth, which in turn determines what kind of processes you're going to use. Again, whether it's for R&D or manufacturing, or if you're Amazon, for logistics, right? And then finally, that in turn determines what kind of products and services you're going to bring to address that customer needs. And that's when you start answering questions like what channels am I going to use? What kind of a relationship am I going to have with my customers, pre-sale or post-sale? And what's my revenue model? What's my cost model? What's my profit model? And the core value addition part, which runs from capabilities to products and service, is what is defined as a business model. So what went wrong in these examples? Let's try to do a postmortem analysis here, right? BASF, as I mentioned, a product that was, by crude measures, 4 times better than existing herbicides, right? And they didn't get any traction in the marketplace. And unfortunately, they did not have the capabilities to do weather analytics on top of this product, right? What's the point of a farmer getting a product that works with 1/4 inch or 1 inch or 2 inch of rainfall if that farmer doesn't even know when it's going to rain or how much it's going to rain, right? But on top of that, BASF, being a specialty chemicals company, was very used to working through distributors. And guess what? Distributors don't care whether they solve a problem for farmers. All they want to do is push tons and tons of product. That's what they get paid for. So incentives were not aligned here. What about Pfizer, right? Pfizer was an expert at bringing drugs into the marketplace, right? And so typically their strategy was work with the right kind of specialists to push these drugs into the marketplace. And in this case, they did the same thing. It was something on diabetes, so they started working with endocrinologists and diabetologists. The problem was FDA came back and said, hey, if you are going to sell inhalable insulin, you better make sure that the people can inhale this drug, right? Which makes perfect sense. So in other words, you have to do a lung function test. And if some of you haven't done it, it's really a 30-second test. There's nothing great about it. But guess what? These specialists didn't have the capabilities to do those tests, and they had to refer these patients to GPs. Extra cost, extra time for these patients. And in other words, their channel strategy was flawed. And then finally, Michelin. To understand the failure of Michelin, you need to understand how the tire industry works, right? Typically in the tire industry, what you do is you come up with these new products, and then you stock them up in the aftermarket tire repair shops, right? And then as more and more people replace their tires, it gains traction, and then OEMs come back and say, hey, I want these tires too in my brand new cars, right, which I'm selling to customers. And so Michelin basically did the same thing. They went to the tire repair shops. But unfortunately, the PAC system was complex and extremely expensive, right? When I go to replace a single tire, I see a $100 tire and a $700 PACs. Guess what I'm going to pick? But on top of that, think about it. As a consumer, if I replace one tire with my PAC system, what happens if I have flat on the other 3 tires? There's no point, right? And so, in other words, their sales channel was flawed. If they had worked with OEMs, right, and said, here is a $2,000 tire, put it on new vehicles, when you're purchasing a $30,000 car, it's not a big deal. But on top of that, I think their partnership strategy was flawed. The PACs was complex. You needed specialized training to replace those tires. You needed specialized equipment. And they never even thought of working with auto repair shops to train these folks to do it, to give them the right kind of equipment. Which brings me to the question, why am I talking about this today? Right? Why is it important today? To answer that question, you need to understand that at a fundamental level, the reason companies are forced to change their business models is because of changing megatrends, right? Think about 2 centuries or 1.5 centuries ago. Products were made with hand. Very expensive, difficult to scale, took a lot of time. And then production technologies matured, right? And now you can make them cheap, make them in large quantities. And guess what? The companies who did not change their business model, who did not adopt these production technologies, were driven out of the marketplace. And today, we are seeing megatrends lining up that's going to force companies to change their business models. And these megatrends are shifting consumer needs, growing interdependence, and finally, risk aversion. Now, my colleague Cosmin is going to talk later about how to use big data analytics to quantitatively figure out what these megatrends are. But let's do a quick qualitative deep dive here to figure out what exactly these megatrends are, right? Shifting consumer needs. Consumers are no longer looking for products. Gone are those days. They're looking for solutions. I went to get a car 6 months ago. I wanted everything built in there, the GPS. I wanted the Bluetooth connectivity, the ability to connect my phone. I didn't want to fiddle around with a Garmin sitting on my dashboard and falling off just when I'm exiting the highway, right? The second trend is growing interdependence. And this is really consisting of several small trends that are coming together. Value chains are getting more intertwined. A single iPhone has components that are sourced from half a dozen countries, right? But it's not just about supply chains. Technologies are coming together. My colleague, Chris Robinson, looked at the mobility trend to figure out what are those technologies that are creating this mobility trend. Guess what he found? Artificial intelligence, sensors, LiDARs, composite materials, energy storage technologies, right? You could even extend it to virtual power plants if these are being now used to load balance and so on, the energy storage technologies. And finally, data, right? Our ability to rapidly move data across space and time, to analyze it at lightning speeds is changing the world, connecting up all kinds of industries, right? Financial companies are no longer just looking at your debt, not just your credit card expenses. They are looking at your emails, text messages, your pictures on social media to figure out whether you're sitting on the beach on a small income somewhere in Caribbean and sipping Mai Tais all day, right? So it's all connecting up. All those industries are coming together. Finally, risk aversion, right? Products are getting more commoditized. Profit margins are decreasing. Consumers' purchasing power is going down day by day. And all this in a rising, volatile environment. Clearly, customers, regardless of whether they are businesses or they are consumers, are looking for technologies, for solutions that address risk for them. And these three megatrends are lining up together to essentially force businesses to change their business models. And we are actually seeing pockets of change actually come up, right? Go back to BASF. I talked about how this product didn't gain traction for so long. In 2016, the company actually partnered with ZX, a weather analytics company. And then they started addressing all these megatrends that we are talking about, right? They started using a technology that was totally outside their realm of expertise, right? Started offering a solution to farmers, translated all this weather data into a probability of success after applying the herbicide, and finally address risk for the farmers with regards to failed herbicide application. But all this would not have been possible unless BASF actually modified its business model, right? Acquired AI capabilities, partnered with the right kind of company, and eventually had to even change their channel, had to start working with farmers instead of distributors, right? And it's not just the chemical industry, right? We are seeing similar kinds of examples coming up in health and wellness, right? So consider large companies like Costco, right? They are now trying to offer wellness solutions to their employees, right? Typically, the way this works is fitness coaches actually establish a wellness plan. And then these large companies are actually working with Omada Health, a startup company that's using connected pedometers, connected scales to gather all the data, analyze this data, and figure out if any of these employees are going to fall off the wagon. And if so, they actually alert the coaches, and these coaches actually start intervening to make sure that they stay on the plan. And again, these companies are leveraging those three megatrends that we talked about, right? Leveraging technologies outside their capabilities, right? Offering holistic solutions, focusing on prevention rather than just cure. And finally, reducing risk for themselves with regards to bad employees falling sick, as well as for their employees in terms of improving their health. And all of this has involved changes to their business model, adding new capabilities, right? Partnering with the right kind of people. And finally, adopting new kinds of revenue models. Omada uses a pay-per-performance kind of a revenue model, which these companies are never used to, but they're still being flexible about it. Effectively, all these companies are seeing an average weight loss in their employees of greater than 4% per year, right? And that's much better than the previous situation where these employees are actually gain weight after going through these fitness plans. And finally, another example from the energy sector, right? STEM is a California-based startup that is basically installing and managing behind-the-meter batteries at commercial and industrial installations. But on top of that, the company also uses analytics to help their customer manage their power, the demand, and so on and so forth. And then on top of that, they aggregate all these batteries together in order to create these virtual power plants. But again, the company is addressing all these megatrends, right? Leveraging technologies that are far away from each other, energy storage and analytics, right? Monitoring the energy usage, helping these customers make money through virtual power plants. And finally, addressing risk with regards to paying too much when the demand is high for these customers, as well as for the utilities by providing them with an asset-light backup facility. Again, this involves a lot of business model changes to the industry itself, right? Adding new capabilities, energy storage, AI, right? Partnering with battery companies in order to establish all this entire infrastructure. And finally, going to new kinds of revenue models, generating revenues from utilities, generating revenues from customers, and so on and so forth. Effectively, the company has installed 130 megawatt hours at 600 plus sites. And they claim 2x to 3x ROI for their customers. The question is, what does this mean for you all today with regards to how you should be innovating in the 21st century? One of the first things I want to mention is all these examples where we saw companies fail, they had a solid process in place, which looks something like this. And I'm sure you have come across this funnel in many other talks, so I don't want to spend too much time here. But it broadly goes from ideation to development to validation to launch eventually. And the megatrend analysis fits all the way up front, where you're trying to filter down ideas. And then the business model analysis eventually comes right out of the megatrend analysis, basically to figure out which of these ideas are really a good fit for my business model, right? But if you think about it, where is the problem then? They have this fantastic innovation management process. Why did they fail? The process is the problem. Processes work until they don't. When it comes to innovation, the analogy I want to give you is we are like 7-year-old children, right? You teach your 7-year-old child how to walk from your home to school, which might be a few blocks away. 2 days later, they are doing a fantastic job. And one day, there's a roadblock. They keep trying to push themselves to the same route. Doesn't work. Feel like they are lost. And then eventually come back home crying. And that is what happened here, right? Michelin failed to align their business model, their megatrend analysis, with the fact that their product was very complex and expensive, right? Pfizer got this feedback from FDA, but failed to align their business model with that FDA feedback. So I can stop here, but it's really incomplete. I need to tell you how to fix this problem. And it depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to innovate new products, or are you trying to innovate existing products? With new products, the fix is you go from doing your megatrend analysis, business model analysis, all the way up front, and only paying lip service to business models, to doing this analysis all along that development process, that ideation process. If Michelin and Pfizer had done that, they would have caught their problems, and today they would have had successful products in the marketplace, right? When it comes to existing products, it's a little bit different. When we are innovating existing products, most of us, we are not using that entire funnel. We just push the products to part of the funnel, and we try to innovate in the box. We just consider technologies that are related to that product, business models that are related to that product. And that is a big mistake, right? That's what BASF did. They said, hey, farmers have a need, right? Something that works with less rainfall. And we're a chemistry company. We're going to come up with a new chemistry product. What happened? 1.5 decades wasted with no growth. And the way you fix this problem is by pushing all your existing products, thousands of them, to the beginning of the funnel, right? And evaluating them in the context of emerging business models and emerging megatrends. Now, this might sound very daunting, but go back to the talks you heard in this conference. Go back to Ari's talk. Go back to the talk you heard from John Melnick, right? All these digital tools are coming together to speed up that process of analysis. So it's no longer daunting. It was daunting 5 years ago, probably not today, right? So what are the implications here? And I already told you about it, right? When I mention the word innovation, what pops up in your head? The iPhone, the Kindle, right? Something totally new, something totally sexy. But what I believe is that there is an equally big opportunity with innovating your existing products. Take those products, analyze them in the context of new business models, new technologies, and other new mega trends that are out there, and try to figure out how are you going to innovate on these products. Thank you very much.